Welcome, everybody, to PFN Quick Slants. As always, I am your host, Brett Yaris, and tonight I am joined by my PFN Weekly co-host, Cody Rourke. What is up, Cody? How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well, Brett. Obviously happy to be here. Quick Slants, where we're going to get into some quick hitting action from some of the biggest topics right now around the National Football League.
That's it. Before we get into it, as always, you can catch me and Cody on PFN Weekly. Make sure you're checking for that on all of our PFN social media channels. Now, Cody, name of the game is Quick Slants. Let's get right into it. First up, Dan Campbell is the new head coach in Detroit. I'm a Dolphins fan, grew up a Dolphins fan. I know Dan well from his interim stint in Miami. A lot of big culture talk coming from Dan Campbell. Not a lot of experience as an X's and O's guy. Although, Cody, we seem to be moving to the era of culture fits at the head coach position, not necessarily schematic guys. I have a feeling he's going to get the players to play hard for him, though I am worried about the kind of staff he can put together. What are your thoughts on the Dan Campbell hire in Detroit?
Well, when you look at Dan Campbell, the history, obviously becoming the interim head coach in Miami for a stint in time, but previously he just served as the assistant head coach to Sean Payton in the New Orleans Saints. Obviously a tight ends coach is there. He's got an eye for understanding talent, but also working with players. His ability, his background, I think when we talk about player versatility, being able to do a multitude of things, I think when you look at Dan Campbell, he can do the same thing from a coaching standpoint. He can relate to players. He can connect to them. He's not one of those, old school guys, but he's not too young of a guy to where, players have that dynamic where they view you as their friend and not their coach. I think he's going to be a different kind of change in culture there, I think, in Detroit. And look, he's inheriting, I think, a roster that has a lot of question marks, specifically at quarterback with Matthew Stafford, what they decide to do. And a lot of that's going to come out of the new GM.
Dolphins fans will remember, because he replaced such a weak character in Joe Philbin, that Dan Campbell, the meme that circulated was him jet skiing on sharks. So we'll see if he's able to inspire that much in Detroit. But let's stay in Detroit, Cody, as we get to the new GM in Detroit, and that is Brad Holmes. Now, Cody, I don't know so much about him. I'm really looking forward to your thoughts, but I will say this. For a coaching cycle that has lacked African-American hires at the coaching positions, we've had two now at the GM level, to now go with Chris Greer in Miami as three African-Americans at the GM position. That is still far too low in a league that has 75% participants of its players as African-Americans, but it is certainly moving in the right direction at the front office level. What do you think Brad Holmes is going to be able to do in Detroit as a general manager?
Well, I think he's going to be given full autonomy, and he served as the director of college scouting for the Los Angeles Rams, and they've had some success bringing in some of these players, developing them, and I think that for the Detroit Lions, they need a real focus. I think last year they got a great player in Jeff Okudah, and unfortunately for him, his rookie season didn't really pan out how I think he had hoped for, or the organization had hoped for, being the number 3 overall pick. So, I think what you're going to get from Brad Holmes is detailed scouting. I think they're really going to emphasize on drafting and developing young players, figuring out which players are the ideal system fit. And really, I think it's going to have to coincide between Holmes and also Dan Campbell and their vision for the organization that's supported by the top level of ownership. What direction does ownership want this organization to take a step forward, especially in that tough NFC North division? A lot of it's going to really hinge on, I think, Brad Holmes trying to build a successful roster and bringing guys in, whether it be free agency or the NFL draft. I think that's going to be the absolute biggest key here for Detroit and for Brad Holmes.
I think one of the issues with Detroit over the years is a lack of personality. And I think that's something that both Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, if nothing else, will bring to the Motor City. But let's take our talents to Duval County, Cody, because that's maybe the biggest splash so far in the coaching cycle, and that is the hiring of the Jacksonville Jaguars of Urban Meyer. I have a lot of personal thoughts on Urban Meyer. He's a guy that, for whatever reason, it always seems when things are about to get tough for him at the NCAA level, he has a health issue and needs to walk away. And here he is in Jacksonville. This is no easy job, Cody, though he is going to get the number 1 pick, and that's likely to be Trevor Lawrence. It's always helpful to get off on the right foot with a stud quarterback, by all seeming can be a franchise quarterback in Duval County. But that defense needs a revamping. The skill position players, aside from maybe DJ Chark and James Robinson, are going to need a lot of work in Jacksonville. This is not an easy job, and I have fears that when the going gets tough, Urban Meyer tends to get going. What are your thoughts on Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, Cody?
Well, I think buyer beware. You look at the history, obviously going back to the University of Florida, you look at Ohio State, and just when, as you mentioned, the trend seems when things get really tough, he sort of kind of takes a step back or starts to retreat. Well, he doesn't have to worry about recruiting practices right now in the NFL. But outside of that, I think he's going to inherit a roster. Look, I think they do have potential. You have to focus your sights, on the offensive side of the ball. If you're going to go with a guy like Trevor Lawrence, you need to surround him with some prolific weapons at wide receiver. I think they have some talented players there, but I think running back, and if you're going to keep your quarterback upright, how can you solidify that offensive line? The offensive side of the ball, in my opinion, Brett, is going to be the most important part of this Jacksonville Jaguars team as they embark on a new journey under Urban Meyer. And also, I think defensively, I think they have enough pieces right now, I think, to do really well. I think free agency is going to be really focused on the defense. I think the offensive side of the ball is going to be really focused on the NFL draft side of things. And I think for Urban Meyer, as you mentioned, it's going to be a tough job. It's not going to be easy, especially in that division.
Absolutely. And look, you're going to get Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback. He's going to be able to have the pieces to build with. We got to see if it comes together and if he's going to be able to stick it out for the long haul, because as you mentioned, that's a division that's in a lot of turmoil right now, and it is begging for someone to rise to the top. Could it be Urban Meyer and the Jaguars? We'll have to see how it plays out. But let's move on to two coaches now who certainly have not locked themselves into jobs, but seem to be the front runners in two locations. And let's stick in that AFC South, Cody, with the Houston Texans. So much turmoil going on with that team and their franchise quarterback, 25-year-old MVP candidate, Deshaun Watson. Not happy, reportedly, with how the GM search was handled. Not happy, reportedly, with how the coaching search was handled. And we have it from our own PFN insider, Benjamin Albright, that he necessarily hasn't been as communicative with the Houston Texans as they would have hoped. So there seems to be a lot of disconnect between those two sides. One of the things that a lot of people are speculating could bridge the gap, the hiring of Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy has become the face of martyrdom for black coaches not getting jobs in the NFL. But what we've been reporting on our show, Cody, that we do together, PFN Weekly, with Benjamin Albright, is that Eric Bieniemy has not done a lot of the things necessary to be a premier coaching candidate. He doesn't call the plays. He's on what's considered a weak coaching tree with Andy Reid when you look at the lack of success with other Andy Reid coaching disciples, such as Matt Nagy over in Chicago. Not only that, he has a very troubling past from his time involved in recruitment at Colorado University. And when he was the play caller for the only time in his career, that offense was horrendous. So there's a lot of reasons for him not to be a head coach, and it's why he didn't get a job in the last coaching cycle, and Houston seems to be the only job he may be able to get in this coaching cycle. Cody, without a doubt, there are race issues when it comes to hiring black coaches in the NFL. There are black coaches who should have been hired this cycle but didn't get the job in favor of lesser qualified white coaches. Eric Bieniemy is not one of them. But Cody, if he does get the job in Houston, what can we expect from the Houston Texans under an Eric Bieniemy-led team? And will it bridge the gap between their disconnect with Deshaun Watson?
I really don't think that it will. You bring in Eric Bieniemy, I don't think it's going to bridge that gap in terms of the overall disconnect that is being experienced right now in Houston. A lot of that comes from the top level up with the general manager, with Cal McNair, with Jack Easterby, and that whole situation right there has been deemed as a toxic environment. When Adam Schefter comes out and says that the relationship right now appears to be irreparable, there's no communication, there's no contact. I don't know if Eric Bieniemy, even though that's a coach that Deshaun Watson wanted the organization to bring in for an interview, it didn't seem like they were looking at bringing him in for an interview until it became more public that Deshaun Watson was more pissed. He went from a 2 to a 10. I just don't know if the weapons around Deshaun Watson will be sustainable. Everyone's looking at the success of the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, guess what? They have a versatility in an arsenal of weapons all across the field, from wide receiver, from tight end, from running back out of the backfield. Houston doesn't have that same luxury. However, they do have a franchise quarterback. So really the biggest point is going to be, what is Houston going to do to support if Eric Bieniemy is the head coach? If Deshaun Watson somehow comes back into the fold here for the organization, what is it that the top-level organization is going to do to surround Deshaun Watson with the talent necessary for them to succeed and maybe put up big numbers?
We'll have to see. The Houston Texans job certainly does not seem like a job for a coach with as many warts and as troubling a past as Eric Bieniemy has could step right into and be successful, but it may be the only job available for him this cycle. We'll have to see how that plays out. Let's move on to the last coach in our conversation for Quick Slants tonight, Cody, and that is Josh McDaniels, the current offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots, who may be the front runner for the Philadelphia Eagles job. Cody, Josh McDaniels is a strong personality. He burnt his bridges with your team, the Denver Broncos, where you serve as the insider and NFL insider for the Locked On Sports Network, not just the NFL, but the Denver Broncos. And you know very well that McDaniels burned his bridges there on his way out. He went back to New England. He called a great offense. He got a shot in Indianapolis, and at the 11th hour, left them standing at the altar. Rest assured, that also burned some bridges. This is a guy who does not have many friends outside of New England, Cody, and I'm not sure that he has endeared himself around the league where he would have support around the league as a head coach, one of the only 32 jobs that are out there. He seems to be the front runner. However, for the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know how he's going to do, Cody. He's not a guy that I would trust with a leadership position. What are your thoughts on him possibly being in the city of brotherly love?
Well, I can tell you, talking to some former Broncos players who played under McDaniels when he was the head coach back for Denver in 2009, he is not a guy that connects well to his players. He's very authoritarian-like in a sense. It's his way or no way. And I don't think it's going to be a great player fit overall in Philadelphia. Now, Josh McDaniels is a phenomenal offensive mind, a phenomenal offensive coordinator. I think he could do some magic there. But the biggest question, as you bring it, up to subject here, Brett, is really the leadership standpoint. I think that's going to be a toxic environment altogether. We talk about Doug Peterson and all of a sudden the roster turning against him in a sense. I imagine what it's going to be like if the Eagles are struggling with Josh McDaniels. He doesn't handle failure. He doesn't handle that stuff very well. And look, that's why he's retreated back to New England over those times to be with Tom Brady, to be with Bill Belichick. Now that Tom Brady is elsewhere in Tampa Bay, now this was a sample year for Bill Belichick and for Josh McDaniels to figure out what is it that we can do with the quarterbacks that we do have. Obviously, the grass is not greener right now in New England, so he could be looking to go to Philadelphia, where, look, they have a promising young quarterback in Carson Wentz, and obviously even Jalen Hurts too. What can he do with that? There's potential there, but I tell you what, I'd be very, very, very against it if I was a Philadelphia Eagles fan of having Josh McDaniels be the guy that's leading your organization, leading your players into battle on Sundays.
And that's the first question that has to get answered in Philadelphia, regardless of who the coach is. What do you do at the quarterback position? Is Josh McDaniels the guy to answer that question? Who knows? We'll have to see. But Cody, thanks for joining me tonight. That was Quick Slants, the quickest version of information we can get you for all the hottest information and breaking news stories going on around the league. The NFL, the only league that could be in the midst of its postseason. And here we are talking about exciting and dramatic coaching controversies. And that's what the NFL is so great. On behalf of Cody Rourke and myself, Brett Yaris, we are part of the Pro Football Network. And this has been Quick Slant.